Welcome, fam. Before we dive into the story, please kindly subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts below. Jake Thompson never imagined that the moment he pulled 5-year-old Sophia Martinez from the churning waters of Clearwater Beach would become the exact second his entire life shattered into pieces. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as he knelt on the hot sand, performing CPR on the unconscious child while panicked beachgoers formed a circle around them. Water streamed from Sophia's small lungs as Jake pressed rhythmically on her chest, counting compressions just like he'd practiced thousands of times in training. When she finally coughed up seawater and her brown eyes fluttered open, Jake felt the familiar rush of pride that came with saving a life. But as Sophia's parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, came running across the beach screaming accusations that made his blood freeze, Jake realized he wasn't looking at grateful parents. He was staring into the faces of his destroyers. Within 30 minutes, police handcuffs bit into his wrists while dozens of smartphones recorded his humiliation, transforming a hero's moment into a nightmare that would haunt him for the next 8 months. That morning had started like any other perfect day in Jake's 7-year career as a lifeguard. He'd arrived at Clearwater Beach at 6 a.m., grabbed his usual black coffee from Maria's cafe, and checked the weather reports that promised calm seas and gentle currents. The beach was his domain, and he ruled it with the quiet confidence of someone who'd made over 40 successful rescues without a single complaint. His red lifeguard chair stood like a throne overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, adorned with his certifications and a photo of him receiving the county's Lifeguard of the Year award just 6 months earlier. He waved to the regular morning joggers, helped an elderly couple set up their umbrella, and settled into what he expected to be another routine day of keeping families safe. But even as Jake scanned the horizon with practiced eyes, he couldn't have known that the Martinez family was already arguing loudly near the water's edge, their 5-year-old daughter Sophia wandering dangerously close to the waves while her parents screamed at each other about money, custody, and who was supposed to be watching their child. The 47 seconds between the moment Jake spotted Sophia's head disappearing beneath the surface and the instant he reached her felt like a lifetime compressed into heartbeats. His whistle shrieked across the beach as he launched himself from his chair, sprinting across the sand with the fluid motion of an Olympic athlete. Other beachgoers turned to see what was happening, but Jake's world had narrowed to a single point of focus, the place where Sophia had gone under. He dove into the water without hesitation, his trained eyes tracking her small form as it sank toward the sandy bottom. The underwater world was eerily silent as Jake pumped his legs, reaching down to wrap his arms around Sophia's unconscious body. Every movement was textbook perfect, exactly as he'd been trained: secure the victim, maintain their airway, get to shore immediately. As he broke the surface with Sophia in his arms, Jake's mind was already shifting into rescue mode, calculating the seconds it would take to reach shallow water and begin life-saving measures. He had no way of knowing that Maria and Carlos Martinez had been 50 yards down the beach, completely oblivious to their daughter's distress, still shouting at each other when other beachgoers finally alerted them to the emergency. The words Jake expected to hear, "Thank you, you saved her life, we're so grateful," never came. Instead, as he knelt beside the now-conscious Sophia, gently checking her breathing and asking if she was okay, her parents appeared like avenging angels with faces twisted by something that looked disturbingly like rage rather than relief. "Get away from her!" Maria Martinez screamed, shoving Jake backward so hard he nearly fell into the sand. "Don't touch my daughter. This is wrong. This feels wrong." Carlos Martinez stepped between Jake and Sophia, his eyes wild with an anger that made no sense to anyone watching. "You touched her inappropriately. I saw you. We all saw you." The accusations hit Jake like physical blows, each word more impossible than the last. The crowd of beachgoers who had been applauding his heroic rescue suddenly fell silent, their expressions shifting from admiration to confusion to something that looked dangerously like suspicion. Jake's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as he tried to process what was happening. I saved her life," he stammered, looking around at the faces that had been friendly just moments before. "She was drowning. I performed CPR." But Maria Martinez was already on her phone, her voice carrying across the suddenly hostile beach. "I need police. A lifeguard just molested my daughter." By the time Jake drove home that evening, completely unaware of the digital wildfire spreading across social media, his face was already on the phones of millions of strangers who had never heard his name but were convinced he was a monster. The hashtag lifeguard predator had begun trending within 2 hours of the incident, fueled by carefully edited video clips that showed Jake's hands on Sophia's chest during CPR but conveniently omitted the part where she was unconscious and dying. Twitter exploded with outraged parents demanding his arrest. Facebook groups shared his photo with warnings to keep your children away from this sick pervert. Instagram stories spread like wildfire, each retelling adding new fictional details about his obviously inappropriate touching and suspicious behavior. The comments section of every post was a cesspool of death threats, calls for vigilante justice, and graphic descriptions of what anonymous users wanted to do to him. Jake discovered his new reality while standing in the cereal aisle of his local grocery store. When he looked up at the television mounted near the pharmacy counter and saw his own face staring back at him above a cheerin that read "Local Lifeguard Accused of Child Molestation," his box of cornflakes hit the floor as shoppers turned to stare, some already reaching for their phones to capture video of the predator buying breakfast. Jake thought the pizza delivery guy was running late when his doorbell rang at 8:30 p.m., but instead of finding a teenager with a pepperoni pizza, he opened his front door to a wall of flashing red and blue lights, news cameras, and Detective Sarah Rodriguez holding a warrant for his arrest. "Jake Thompson, you're under arrest for child molestation and sexual battery," she announced, her voice carrying clearly to the news crews that had somehow known to be there before Jake did. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists as his elderly mother, Eleanor, watched from the living room window, her face crumpling into tears that would haunt Jake's dreams for months. His neighbors emerged from their houses like spectators at a gladiator match, some holding their phones up to record his humiliation while others whispered behind their hands and pulled their own children closer. The perp walk from his front door to the police cruiser felt like the longest 20 yards of his life, each step captured by dozens of cameras and broadcast live on local news stations. His fiancée Emma Richardson arrived just as the police car was pulling away, her face a mask of shock and confusion as reporters shoved microphones in her direction, demanding to know if she'd ever suspected her boyfriend was capable of such horrible crimes. The next morning, Jake's supervisor at the Clearwater Beach Lifeguard Service couldn't meet his eyes as he slid a pink termination slip across the desk, mumbling something about pending investigation and protecting the organization's reputation. The union representative who should have been fighting for Jake's rights sat silently in the corner, occasionally nodding as the supervisor explained why they couldn't support someone facing such serious allegations. Jake's 7 years of perfect service, his commendations, his spotless record, none of it mattered when weighed against the PR nightmare his case had become. Within 48 hours, his savings account began its rapid descent toward zero as legal fees mounted and his source of income disappeared. The Pinellas County Attorney's Office assigned him an overworked public defender who seemed more interested in negotiating a plea deal than fighting the charges. Emma started staying at her sister's house, claiming she needed space to think. But Jake could see the doubt growing in her eyes every time she looked at him. The media had set up a semi-permanent camp outside his house, making it impossible for him to leave without running a gauntlet of shouted questions and camera flashes that turned every grocery run into a public spectacle of shame. While Jake's world crumbled in real time, he had no idea that the Martinez family he was dealing with had turned destroying innocent people's lives into a profitable business model. Private investigator Marcus Webb, hired by Jake's new attorney, uncovered a paper trail that read like a criminal enterprise disguised as a series of unfortunate coincidences. Carlos and Maria Martinez had filed similar accusations against 3 other service workers over the past 5 years. A pediatric nurse who had treated Sophia for a broken arm, a swimming instructor who had given her lessons at the YMCA, and a daycare worker who had changed her diaper during a family emergency. Each case had followed the same pattern: emotional parents making tearful accusations, media coverage that destroyed the accused person's reputation, and quiet financial settlements that were sealed from public view. The insurance companies that had paid out these settlements were now very interested in talking to Webb, especially when he showed them the Martinez family's luxury car purchases, expensive vacations, and home improvements that seemed to coincide perfectly with their legal victories. Court documents revealed that Maria Martinez had even researched the average settlement amounts for child abuse cases, bookmarking websites that calculated potential payouts based on the severity of alleged trauma and the defendant's ability to pay. The night Jake seriously considered ending his life was also the night that everything began to change, though he wouldn't discover this cosmic irony for several more weeks. He sat alone in his darkened living room, Emma's engagement ring heavy in his palm as he contemplated a future that seemed to hold nothing but legal bills, public hatred, and the slow disintegration of everything he'd worked to build. His parents had stopped returning his calls after their neighbors began harassing them about their pervert son. His friends had melted away like snow in summer, unwilling to be associated with someone facing such serious charges. The bottle of sleeping pills on his coffee table promised an end to the nightmare, a permanent solution to problems that felt impossibly large and utterly unsolvable. But 15 miles away, in a climate-controlled evidence room at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, Detective Rodriguez was cataloging items recovered from the beach, including a waterproof GoPro camera that had been found half buried in sand near the lifeguard station. The camera belonged to tourist Kevin Chong, who had been snorkeling nearby when Sophia Martinez nearly drowned, and its memory card contained 43 minutes of underwater footage that would soon change everything Jake thought he knew about justice, truth, and the power of evidence to overcome lies. The truth had literally been underwater the entire time, waiting patiently on a memory card while Jake's life imploded above the surface. Kevin Chang's GoPro had captured the entire rescue from a unique underwater perspective, showing Sophia sinking toward the bottom while her parents remained completely oblivious to her distress 50 yards away. The footage was crystal clear: Jake's dive into the water, his textbook-perfect rescue technique, his urgent but entirely appropriate life-saving measures on the beach. Every hand placement during CPR was visible, every movement professional and necessary. There was no inappropriate touching, no suspicious behavior, no evidence of anything except a highly trained lifeguard doing exactly what he was supposed to do to save a child's life. When Jake's new attorney, Patricia Chun, called him with the news, Jake thought he was dreaming. "We have video evidence of the entire incident," she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Underwater footage that shows everything. Jake, this completely exonerates you. Every single accusation they made is provably false." The irony wasn't lost on either of them that the evidence which would save Jake's life had been submerged in the same water where he'd saved Sophia's life, waiting for the right moment to surface and restore the truth. The same courtroom that was supposed to be the stage for Jake's public destruction became the theater for his complete vindication. Judge Margaret Foster's voice carried clearly across the packed gallery as she reviewed the underwater footage that had been presented as evidence. "Mr. Thompson," she said, looking directly at Jake with something that might have been an apology in her eyes, "this court finds that you acted heroically and professionally in saving this child's life. The accusations against you are not only without merit, they are contradicted by clear video evidence." The criminal charges were dropped immediately, but Judge Foster wasn't finished. Her scathing remarks to the Martinez family would be quoted in newspapers for weeks. "This court has rarely seen such a blatant abuse of our legal system. False accusations of this nature don't just harm the innocent person being accused. They make it harder for real victims to be believed, and they waste precious police resources that should be protecting actual children from actual predators." As Jake walked out of the courthouse a free man, reporters who had once painted him as a monster now scrambled to get quotes from the vindicated hero. But something had changed in Jake's eyes during those 8 months of hell. The grateful smile he'd once worn after every rescue had been replaced by something harder, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous to people who thought they could destroy innocent lives without consequences. The Martinez family thought destroying Jake's life would be the end of the story, but they were about to learn that some people don't just walk away when they're wronged. They fight back with everything they have. Jake's transformation from victim to hunter began the morning after his vindication, when he sat across from attorney Patricia Chan and laid out his plan for legal revenge that would make the Martinez family's previous scams look like practice rounds. "I want to sue them for everything," Jake said, his voice steady and cold. "Malicious prosecution, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to commit fraud. I want them to pay for every dollar I lost, every night I couldn't sleep, every relationship they destroyed, and every tear my mother shed because of their lies." Chin had handled plenty of countersuits, but she'd never seen the methodical determination that Jake displayed as he outlined his case. He had saved every threatening email, screenshotted every social media post, documented every financial loss, and kept a detailed journal of the emotional damage their false accusations had caused. When news of Jake's lawsuit broke, the Martinez family's attorney tried to arrange an immediate settlement meeting, but Jake's response was swift and final. "Tell them I'm not interested in their money anymore. I'm interested in justice." The legal discovery phase became Jake's systematic dismantling of the Martinez family's entire fraudulent enterprise, one document at a time. Subpoenas flew like arrows, targeting bank records, insurance claims, communication records, and medical files that revealed the full scope of their operation. Jake's legal team discovered that Maria Martinez had researched child abuse settlement amounts on her computer just 2 days before the beach incident, bookmarking pages about maximizing compensation for trauma victims and how to build a strong case against institutional defendants. Carlos Martinez's phone records showed calls to 3 different personal injury attorneys within an hour of making the false accusations against Jake. Their financial records revealed a pattern of luxury purchases following each of their previous legal settlements. A BMW after the daycare worker case, a kitchen renovation after the swimming instructor settlement, and a family vacation to Europe funded by their lawsuit against the pediatric nurse. Insurance investigators came forward with evidence that the Martinez family had been flagged as potential fraudsters, but the companies had chosen to settle rather than fight expensive court battles. Jake watched from his attorney's office as each piece of evidence was cataloged, feeling a cold satisfaction as the paper trail of their crimes grew thicker and more damning with each passing day. When the Martinez family offered Jake a settlement that would have made him financially whole and then some, His legal team strongly advised him to take the money and move on with his life. "This is a generous offer," Patricia Chen explained, sliding the settlement papers across her desk. "It covers all your lost wages, legal fees, and includes substantial compensation for emotional distress. You could put this nightmare behind you and start fresh." But Jake pushed the papers back without even reading the dollar amount. "This was never about money," he said, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even him. "They tried to destroy me because they thought I was powerless. They thought they could ruin an innocent man's life and face no consequences. If I take their money and disappear quietly, what's to stop them from doing this to the next person? What's to stop other families from thinking they can turn false accusations into profit?" The Martinez family's desperation became apparent when they increased their settlement offer 3 times in 2 weeks, each proposal more generous than the last. Jake rejected them all, knowing that what he wanted couldn't be bought with money. He wanted justice, accountability, and a public reckoning that would ensure they could never hurt another innocent person again. Just when Jake thought he was fighting his battle alone, an army he never knew existed stepped forward to join his cause. Sarah Mitchell, the pediatric nurse who had been falsely accused by the Martinez family 3 years earlier, was the first to reach out. "I took their settlement because I couldn't afford to fight," she told Jake over coffee, tears streaming down her face. "But I've regretted it every day since. When I saw you refusing to back down, I knew I had to help." Within days, other victims emerged from the shadows: the swimming instructor who had lost his job and moved to another state, the daycare worker who had been forced to change careers, and a maintenance worker from Sophia's school who had been accused but never formally charged. Together, they formed a united front that transformed Jake's individual lawsuit into something much larger, a class action case that would hold the Martinez family accountable for years of fraud and prevent them from victimizing anyone else. The community that had once turned Jake now rallied to his cause, with local businesses offering free services, neighbors organizing fundraisers to help with legal costs, and former colleagues publicly apologizing for their doubt and offering to testify on his behalf. The trial that would determine Jake's future and the Martinez family's fate began on a crisp October morning, with news vans lining the courthouse steps and reporters broadcasting live updates to audiences across the country. Judge Foster's courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with overflow seating in the hallway for spectators who had come to witness what the media was calling the trial of the decade. Jake sat at the plaintiff's table wearing the same blue suit he'd bought for his lifeguard award ceremony, feeling calmer than he had in over a year. The jury selection had taken 3 days, as potential jurors were questioned about their opinions on false accusations, social media trials, and their ability to remain impartial despite the massive publicity surrounding the case. When Patricia Chen stood to deliver her opening statement, the courtroom fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about what happens when people decide that destroying an innocent person's life is an acceptable way to make money. You're going to hear evidence that the defendants turned false accusations into a business model and that Jake Thompson was simply their latest victim in a years-long pattern of fraud and manipulation." The moment Maria Martinez took the witness stand, Jake knew the trial had shifted irreversibly in his favor. Under cross-examination, her carefully rehearsed testimony began to crumble like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Mrs. Martinez," Patricia Chen said, holding up printed emails, "can you explain why you researched child abuse settlement amounts 2 days before accusing Mr. Thompson?" Maria's answer was a stuttering mess of contradictions. "Mrs. Martinez, how do you explain the fact that your phone records show you called 3 personal injury attorneys within an hour of making your accusations?" Carlos Martinez fared even worse, his testimony contradicted by his own social media posts and text messages that had been recovered during discovery. When Chen presented evidence of their previous false accusations, the courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers that Judge Foster had to gavel into silence. The Martinez family's own attorney looked defeated, occasionally glancing toward the exit as if contemplating abandoning his clients mid-trial. By the time the prosecution rested their case, even the most skeptical observers could see that Jake wasn't just innocent, he was the victim of a deliberate, calculated conspiracy designed to destroy his life for financial gain. When the jury foreman stood to deliver the verdict after 6 hours of deliberation, Jake felt his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. In the matter of Thompson versus Martinez, the foreman announced, his voice steady and clear, "We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $800,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $1.5 million. The courtroom exploded in applause and cheers that Judge Foster made no attempt to silence. Jake's legs gave out as the full weight of vindication crashed over him, and Patricia Chin had to help him back into his chair as reporters furiously scribbled notes and photographers captured his tears of relief. The $2.3 million judgment was the largest award for false accusations in county history, sending a clear message that fraud disguised as justice would face serious consequences. Maria Martinez collapsed into sobs at the defense table while Carlos stared blankly at the ceiling, both of them finally understanding that their years of easy money and consequence-free crime had come to an end. As Jake walked out of the courthouse surrounded by supporters and well-wishers, he realized that winning the trial was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he would use his experience to help others who faced similar injustices. Jake's legal victory created ripples that spread far beyond Pinellas County, inspiring changes that would protect future victims of false accusations. The Thompson Standard became shorthand for the thoroughness required in investigating abuse allegations, with police departments across Florida adopting new protocols that emphasized evidence gathering over rush-to-judgment arrests. State legislators introduced bills that would create civil penalties for knowingly false accusations, while insurance companies began implementing stricter investigation procedures to prevent fraud. Jake used his settlement money to establish the Thompson Foundation for the falsely accused, providing legal assistance and emotional support to people facing circumstances similar to what he had endured. His relationship with Emma slowly rebuilt on a foundation of shared trauma and renewed trust, stronger than it had been before the crisis tested their bond. The beach community welcomed him back with open arms, and when he returned to his lifeguard post 6 months after the trial, he received a standing ovation from beachgoers who remembered what he had sacrificed to save a child's life. Local news stations featured regular updates on his foundation's work, and Jake became a sought-after speaker at legal conferences and victim advocacy events across the country. The Martinez family's complete destruction served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of turning the legal system into a personal ATM. Their assets were seized to pay Jake's judgment, forcing them to sell their luxury cars, downsize their home, and liquidate investments they had built through years of fraudulent settlements. Carlos lost his job when his employer learned about the trial, and Maria found herself unemployable in her field after her name became synonymous with false accusations. Their extended family and former friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with people who had made a career out of destroying innocent lives. Sophia, now 8 years old and old enough to understand what her parents had done, publicly thanked Jake at a community event, apologizing for her family's actions and expressing gratitude for the man who had saved her life when she was 5. Jake knelt down to her level, looked into the same brown eyes he remembered from that day on the beach, and told her she was never responsible for her parents' choices. As he stood back up and looked out at the crowd of supporters who had gathered to hear her speak, Jake realized that his journey from victim to victor had taught him something invaluable. Sometimes the system works, but only if you refuse to let injustice have the last word. The boy who had once saved lives from drowning had learned to save his own life from something far more dangerous, the lie that good people should stay quiet when evil people try to destroy them. If this story of justice and redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of people who refuse to back down when faced with injustice. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that fighting back against false accusations is not only possible, it's necessary. Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Jake's situation? Would you have taken the settlement money, or would you have fought for justice like he did? Your engagement helps us bring you more stories of real people overcoming impossible odds, so don't forget to ring that notification bell and join our community of justice seekers.